next, we're going to hear from a panel on owning your power in a male-dominated world. I think there's a lot of crossover, but Frida certainly gave us a lot of tips, and I think that the next panel is also going to be speaking about this in a similar way, but different. It's more about specific things that you can do to advocate for yourself and troubleshoot when you're not being treated well. What we have are 4 leaders who are going to really, I think, take us on a journey of how to be more powerful when sitting in a room of men. The women on the panel are Michelle Ann Johnson, Uma Gopaldass, and Ashley Gutierrez. Wow, I practiced those so many times, and I'm so sorry that I didn't get it right the first time. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I will introduce our moderator, who is Janet Watson, who happens to be one of our mentors. She mentors Thierry, who's a freshman at Gettysburg. Janet has her own consulting practice, and she consults C-suite executives as well as academicians in how to be more effective in designing and delivering experiential learning programs, and helping teachers and executives express themselves more effectively and be more interactive. I love also that Janet is an ex-professional figure skater, and she still skates. She was also very critical in planning and executing the freshman portion of the summit, which is we're in the middle of. They had a session yesterday, and they'll have a session at the end. And also, importantly, she recruited these amazing women that we're going to hear from now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janet. And again, thank you, Frida.
Welcome, and thank you, Barb and Frida. That was such a gift to hear your story and stories and learn from you as well. I'll turn it over to our panelists and let them introduce themselves. I think that's a really nice way to warm up and join in the day. And I also just wanted to add on that I do still skate, and I still fall a lot. And I've learned through the years to pick up myself in many, many different areas. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. If you'll just do a nice little intro, that'd be great.
Excellent. Hello, Janet. Hello, scholars. Hello, everyone. As Janet said, my name is Michelle Ann Johnson. I'm a leadership communication consultant. I work with leaders and teams, helping them to become better communicators, to speak with confidence and clarity. And I've been doing this work for about 8 years. Actually, Janet and I used to work for an organization together. That's where we met. And before that, I was an actress in Hollywood. I'm in Los Angeles for about 25 years. I've done everything from Shakespeare to stand-up comedy. I've done the rounds. I've been on some of the television shows that I'm sure you guys watch. Either you guys are too young to watch them when they were actually airing, but I'm sure you've seen some of the shows in rerun. So now I'm in my second career as a consultant and entrepreneur.
Lovely. And Uma, do you want to jump in?
Hi, yes. Hi, ladies. It's great to see you all. My name is Uma Gopaldass. I have a corporate strategy and human engagement company. I'm a board of director in a couple of companies. I come from Singapore, and I've worked 30 years in oil and gas and gold mining. So I used to joke that I was a gold digger. Literally, I worked underground mining, and I've driven haul trucks, which are bigger than a building. So it's really fun. And I hope to share all of my wisdom and learn from you guys about this very well-needed topic.
Wonderful. And Ashley, jump in.
Hello, thank you for having me today. I'm so excited to meet you. My name is Ashley Gutierrez. I am a Colombian American. I live in Austin, Texas. My former career, I was an event producer where I got to literally set the stage for people to share their gifts with the world, including several world leaders and US leaders here in the United States. I've shifted my career, as a lot of us have, and I work in talent and recruiting at a company called Qualio, where I focus on bringing in the best and diverse talent that we can to build our products as a software company. And I'm a maker I love to make. I make art. I love space design, food and home decor, something that I love to do. And I'm also a mentor at Built by Girls, helping girls find their way and learn about the tech industry and how to break in. And I'm excited to be here with you today.
And I'm really excited to get going, so let's jump right in. We have a lot of really wonderful questions that were sent to us by the scholars. We queried them earlier on what they'd like to hear about in actually working and owning your own power in a male-dominated world. So we're building on Frida's talk, which most of you were just on, and we'll pull some elements from what Frida had to share with us into the discussion as well. And again, back to keeping this a conversation, it's really enjoyable to hear from the panelists when they can add in whatever elements they want to. So I'll be starting with a question and then we can table it and see where it goes. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So we put these into three categories, all the questions that came in. The first one being owning your power and advocating for yourself. The second category being responding to harassment. And the third being navigating relationships with male colleagues in the workplace. Or for the scholars, primarily, a lot of that is either with internships or in their campus life. So one of our first questions is, what are some ways or some steps we can take to own our own power? And I think I'll just start off with you, Michelle. And maybe when you talk about that, describe also what your definition is of personal power. We all have a different one. So take it away.
Oh, I love this question because personal power is something that I've actually been researching for the last 3 years, I would say, legitimately, but of course, all my life, I think, in some ways. And when I think about personal power and why it's so important, personal power, there are different types of power that you can have, but personal power comes from within you. It is self-generated power. And because it's self-generated and because it's self-directed, nobody can take it from you. Nobody can define it for you. So personal power is, in my view, probably the most powerful power that you can have. And so in my research and really trying to think of a framework for how do you teach personal power, I've come down to 3 principles that I feel are the foundations of personal power, and they're authenticity, confidence, and purpose. And really trying to define what those are, because those are abstract terms. Everybody throws out authenticity. Just be authentic. Well, if it were that easy, everyone would be authentic, right? We wouldn't have any problems with authenticity or confidence or purpose. So for me, authenticity is knowing yourself and showing yourself. So there are 2 pieces to that: knowing who you are, knowing your values, knowing what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what do you believe. What's your lived experience? What is the wisdom you gain from that lived experience? Because again, that's something that nobody can take away from you. Nobody can tell you what you have experienced. That's you. But most importantly, what have you learned from that lived experience? And so taking all of that resource and all of that knowledge and knowing who you are to your core kind of touches back on what Frida was talking about. When you know who you are, people can't tell you who you are. You have that character and that integrity that you then lead with. So knowing yourself, but then also showing yourself to other people, not being afraid to be transparent and vulnerable about what you believe, about what your values are, about what your boundaries are, what you will and what you won't do, how you want to be treated and how you don't want to be treated. And so when you know yourself, everything kind of stems from that: your self-respect, your self-esteem, your self-confidence. All of that stems from the authenticity piece. But then there's the confidence piece, which is believing in your abilities, believing in your talents and your gifts and your ability to accomplish a goal. And that's so important, especially when you're young, to be able to say to yourself, you know what, I've got my back. I'm going to set a vision for myself or set a goal for myself. And I know that I can work and toward that goal and I can accomplish it. Again, that's something nobody can take away from you. Because somebody may say to you, you know, oh, you can't do that. But if you have self-confidence, you can say, oh, yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. But then I think another piece of confidence is having the proof, having the receipts for yourself, having those success stories of, you know, I've accomplished this in the past. I've done this in the past. And all of those success stories are building blocks to build your self-confidence and your belief in your ability to accomplish things. And then finally, there's the purpose piece, which is your vision for who you want to be and how you want the world to be as well. And your vision is what gives you a sense of direction, but most importantly, it gives you a sense of meaning and contribution, how you're contributing to the world, what your gifts and your talents and your value that you have come to because of that authenticity piece, how are you sharing that with the world? How are you contributing and making the world a better place because of who you are and your inherent gifts and talents? So that's my definition of personal power.
Mhm.
And, you know, we can talk a little bit more about that, but, you know, it really is the root, the foundation of everything that you do in the world. If you can get that piece back, if you can get that piece down when you're young, it took me some time to work into that, frankly, because of external messages from parents, friends, society, coworkers who said, oh no, you're not that person, you're this person, or we want you to be this person instead of this person, instead of who you are. Sometimes you've got to fight against some of those messages to be really sure and confident in who you are as an individual and as a woman. I'll stop there. I could go all day.
I know you can. I was just about to jump in. Michelle, do you think then that a lot of this comes from, it's an ongoing process, and especially these are scholars that are in college. So a lot of this lands at different times in their lives, like the confidence piece for how they actually listen and hear, how they're showing up, the perception piece. Do you feel that that is an ongoing element that they should be receptive to moving forward?
Absolutely. This is not about perfection. It's about progress. And who you are today is different than who you were yesterday. And who you are today is going to be different than who you are two years from now, 10 years from now. It's really about personal development.
Mm-hmm.
And in setting your intention to develop as an individual, as a person, as a woman, as, you know, as a mature adult in the world. And you know, if you can keep track of those pieces of yourself and set an intention to develop yourself authentically, to develop your confidence in your abilities, to develop all of those things. And, you know, sometimes you're going to have to change your definition of who you are. But that's okay. That's part of the process. And so even when you're young, you still know who you are. You still have enough information and enough evidence to know what you've been taught, what you believe, what your values are, and also start to develop for yourself, what are your boundaries? What is your ethical code? Like Frida was saying, what is that thing that, you know what, that's the line that I will cross or won't cross. Even, you know, I don't care how much money you offer me. I don't care if I have to lose my job. I don't care, you know, this is who I am and this is my code of conduct. That's so important to start to develop. And that's going to get tested. But just know that that's just a part of life. Those things will get tested and you might have to rearrange some things, but that's okay. Have a starting place.
Yes. And Uma, what are your thoughts on the personal power and how to really step into it to own it?
Yeah, I mean, Michelle said it really well. For me, it has been and it will be for everyone a personal journey of overcoming a series of personal deep struggles, right? And challenges, and also wins. So don't forget the wins. and overcoming many obstacles, including my own fears, right? I have fear of rejection, fear of failing, fear of loss, fear of being criticized, all of that, right? When you can overcome those things in your mind mentally, and overcome struggles, you innately, you don't even know that you have your own personal power. You're building it up. You know, it took me a long while to recognize I had personal power, because I was able to say no to a lot of situations that compromised my own moral values, right? And so it's not like immediately, you know, oh, I have personal power. It's something that you grow. It's an accumulation of deep experiences that actually reveals how strong you are. You know, we are resilient people. When we have a lot more power than we ourselves give ourselves credit. So soon, you know, I was depending more on my strength of character, and no matter what happens, I know no one can break me. No situation can break me. And I use that to lead my life in all aspects. I'm 46 now, so I've learned those things, and I can talk to you about it. But even 5 years ago, I didn't know I had personal strength. I didn't know I owned my own personal power, right? So I've become stronger, more positive, right? Graceful, and I hope, and not hope, I have more faith in myself. And you will see, you start to surround yourself with good people who will build you up, right? And not tear you down. And you will start to cut out all the toxic situations and toxic people. And you'll start to recognize when you're in your personal power, yeah, that's not going to cut it for me. I need something better in my life. When you start surrounding yourself with good stuff, you know you're stepping into your power. Yeah. And as you overcome challenges, big or small, and you have to celebrate your achievements, most of the time women forget to celebrate the achievements we make. Your confidence, like Michelle said, it starts to soar, right? It just goes up. And that's when you know you're in your power. So remember to always build yourself up, right? With grace, honor, integrity. Always be humble, because the next challenge is around the corner. Life is like that. But you know you have it. You've got this. You can overcome it. And that's your personal power.
It's interesting when I'm listening to you, and I'm sure the others might feel this way as well. It sounds like scaffolding that you're building upon from the very start. And you just keep filling in with other elements, the wins. Maybe there's some vulnerability pieces. We talked about this with the freshmen yesterday. It's scary, but we all have those moments where we feel really vulnerable. And then what do you do with those? And you weave those back into this growing building of what actually is you, and how you're going to appear in the world, and how you lead with that inner strength. And I don't think that building ever stops. It is a continuous process of growing and learning and being humble and going, oh, I didn't know that. Maybe I should research that a little bit more. I like the way you described that. And then I want to make room for Ashley. What about the personal power piece for you?
Absolutely. Several examples and stories that I can tell. And I think to mimic off of Uma and Michelle's statements, acknowledging your fears is a good step in place to start. Sometimes things are uncomfortable. Sometimes they seem scary and you're like, I don't think I have the knowledge or the ability to do this. You absolutely do. You may stumble, you may fall, but you own that power to make that decision in your life, whether it's in school, whether it's in work. Showing up today could be an example. And there's so many other things that you can do in owning your power, seeking projects in school or in work, and where you can add value, create visibility for yourself, showing up to a new role or new job or a new class, and acknowledging your ambition, that you're here to learn, be curious, ask questions. Those are ways that you're showing up, that you own your power and where you want to go in your life.
I think a lot of that is taking action. Instead of sitting back and waiting for someone else to take it for you, it's taking action yourself.
Yeah.
Let's
Janet,
move on. Yes.
Janet, can I just I want to add an example of the difference that personal power can make.
Sure.
I started my career at 18, or my first real job out in the world was when I was 18 years old. I was working in a coffee house, local coffee house, and I experienced real sexual harassment. I mean, the kind of sexual harassment where the manager was leering over my shoulder, saying lewd things and telling me that there was nothing I could do about it because he was the manager and they were going to believe him and not me. And it was a real situation. At the time, I was 18 years old. I didn't know myself. I didn't know my power. I didn't have confidence in my ability to leave that job and find another job. So my perception was I'm trapped. I didn't have any sense of purpose or vision, which I'm 18 years old. It was my first job. And so I stayed in that situation for far longer than I probably needed to, but I didn't see a way out. But that's what having a lack of personal power does. It cuts you off from what your options are. Fast forward to 4 years ago, where I was in a situation with a company that I used to work for, and the CEO was let's just say a very belligerent type of person. And I ended up quitting, and then he fired me. It was one of those situations, you're not quitting, I'm going to fire you. And then he started to send me this threatening letter from his lawyer, threatening that he was going to sue me. And it became kind of a harassing type of situation. Well, by then I'd had my power. I'd come into myself. I'd come into my personal power. And let's just say I handled the situation with my lawyer and let him know in no uncertain terms, you will not threaten me. And let me tell you how this is going to go down. So that's the difference, that personal power, like Uma was saying, it gives you the strength to say no. It gives you the strength to put up those boundaries when necessary. Just wanted to share that, Janet.
Yeah, no, thank you. As well as Frida said something that was so memorable, in that no is a complete sentence. And to hold that as an answer when things maybe don't go the way you want them to, that's okay, that no, this doesn't work for me, or just plain no. And of course, it depends on how you say it as well. But I think there's a lot of value in back to owning your personal power, which we all have those different descriptions of what our personal power is. And then how do we bring it into the workplace is extremely important. I'm going to move on to another question. As an example, there was a business trip opportunity that was given to men instead of women, saying that the place is rural and the company doesn't want women to suffer. Is this sort of a belittling of women or an act of concern? And what should we do in this situation to show that women have as much courage as men? And this is again coming from one of the scholars. Uma, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I like this question because this happens a lot, right? I'm going to tell all of you, there's no place a woman cannot be that a man is already existing, full stop. I worked offshore on oil rigs. I was 16 years old when I was working in remote, offshore towns in Africa, Angola, Nigeria, Indonesia, in the middle of nowhere, Cambodia, Vietnam, you name it, I'm there. Because oil and gas is offshore most of the time. I've never been told I'm not allowed to go there. All I've been told was the company has always given me trainings and given me adequate tools to understand the dangers and send me off. So they've never said no to me. How you want to approach the situation is you have to use your personal power and approach the person. First of all, you need to really understand, is this a real concern? Is he being genuinely, truthful, and, maybe as sisters or, daughters that he would feel the same way? Or is it something of a different agenda? I've been in situations where there has been male-only business trips for some personal after-hour fun. So, they kind of deny access to women colleagues to go on certain business trips. So how I would approach this is, nobody else can define suffering for you, right? You have to define what you're capable of doing and not. That's an opportunity that should not be denied to you. they have to still give you the opportunity of a business trip, and you have to decide whether it's safe enough for you to go on that trip. Now, most big companies wouldn't do that. Like, I've worked for a lot of companies, they wouldn't deny because it's safe. I worked in Saudi Arabia, I've worked in all sorts of places where we have to be careful about, as women, how we hold ourselves in those environments. So I would talk to the person and say, oh, I was really looking forward to this business trip, and it's a great opportunity for me to really learn about operations in this remote site and engage with them. I hope you do not take this opportunity away from me. So now you're rephrasing it as, don't be worried, it should be my decision. And do not deny me of the opportunity of progress in my career. So that's how I would approach it. And I would love to hear from Michelle and Ashley as well.
Yes, Ashley, Michelle?
I think just to mimic everything Uma stated, it's all about data. Everything in life is about data. Ask questions. Like I would ask for a list of reasons why a man should go versus me. If it's such a concern, think creatively on if you're the right person to be in that business meeting and go on that trip. How might we look at it differently? We've got technology today that you can video in if it's that much of a concern for your physical safety. But to Uma's point, I would really question why they're enforcing that it's not safe enough for you to attend that trip.
Michelle?
Yeah, this is, yeah. For me, the crux of the problem with this situation is that it's about denying the choice.
Mm-hmm.
When someone is taking away your choice, that is inappropriate. And that for me crosses a boundary. If they were truly, worried about your safety, they can share that concern with you, but give you the option to decide whether or not you want to take that risk. But to not even give you the option, that's the problem. And so I feel like this kind of touches on, and we're probably going to talk about this, Janet. I know one of the questions is about how do you advocate for yourself, and also kind of what is inappropriate and what is appropriate. Again, it's about clarity. I think being clear about what's actually happening here is really crucial in addressing the problem. Because once you get clarity about the situation, then you know how to talk about it, you know how to communicate. So for me, the problem in this situation is the choice. And so when you communicate that to people, that's the piece to zero in on, rather than to make it a larger issue. I think sometimes when we don't have a lack of clarity, and then we try to advocate for ourselves, because we don't have that clarity, we can make it about other things that can muddy the situation.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And to interrupt you, actually, excuse me.
No.
I think it's a combination of the data, of the clarity piece, and then also the value piece of how to weave in the values that you bring to this certain situation, and how your presence, or maybe it is video presence, as Ashley said, can really add value to the whole situation, whether you're there in a physical presence or a video presence. But that clarity piece is so extremely important, back to asking questions first and being really clear on it. I'm going to move ahead because we have so many really wonderful questions. Another one is, how do we find out about getting involved in different organizations around diversity, leadership, and supporting women? Uma?
Yeah. There's so much going on diversity and inclusion. I run a lot of diversity, inclusion, anti-discrimination programs and all of that. It's everywhere. I would say it's not there yet. And by that, what I mean is it's not everywhere globally. In US, there's so many organizations. There's the National Diversity Council. There's tons of them, loads of them out there. If you just Google, they just pop out. In Asia, where I'm from, it's still a struggle. So what I would say is it's happening because it's a paradigm shift that's happening now. COVID is pushing everything through, plus the last 4 years of what's been going on in the world. right? So right now and Janet, that's how I met Janet, was I've been trained to get on a board role because they need more diversity in boardrooms where it's all typically male dominated, white male dominated in that region. So it's starting to happen in terms of diversity and inclusion at all levels. Typically, it's always talked about at a level where it's not executive or above that. So I would say in your region, in your area, in your countries, it's starting to happen. I would research it like crazy, join and be part of the action, be part of the movement. This is a very exciting time for women and for all nations, all colors, all backgrounds. Join organizations that are speaking of diversity and inclusion and learn about it. How do you enact that? How do you make that happen?
Very good points to jump in and be part of the conversation now while you're learning and developing this voice and learning from others that are already putting together the visions, the conversations that women are having as they lead in the world. Jumping ahead, I would love to hear from all three of you, maybe Ashley first, on, in your experience, what determines appropriate and inappropriate behavior?
Sure. This is a tough one because I think it's the same as owning your power and how you show up. What is not comfortable to you is inappropriate. I think it's as simple as that. I have had a situation where I had a male leadership individual call me sweetie and put his hand on my shoulder. And although that probably was not ill will on his behalf, that is not okay. That's uncomfortable for me, and that's it's inappropriate. And it is an example of a situation where I didn't feel like I owned my power. I did not say anything in that situation, but I later talked to someone, and I'll talk about it later on about how to never stay silent. But that for me is inappropriate behavior. And again, I push it back to state if it feels uncomfortable, it's inappropriate, and it's simple as that.
Michelle, Uma, what are your opinions on this?
Yeah, I think it comes back to clarity about the roles that we are in, and clarity about the nature of the relationship. When we're hired to perform a job, we're hired to perform that job. We're not hired to be called sweetie. We're not hired to humor people and inappropriate jokes. We're not hired to do things that make us uncomfortable. We're not hired to do things that are outside of what our designated role or job responsibilities are. We're hired for a specific job, and in exchange for that, they give us money. And so being really clear about that as a young woman, I think would have helped me tremendously. What am I here to do? I'm here to perform this particular job, and everything outside of that, I can say no to. So it goes back to those boundaries. And if it's, if it's not something that I feel comfortable with, if it makes me uncomfortable, if it's outside of my duties, then it's inappropriate.
So I agree with the ladies, and I like what Ashley said. For me, it's if you go home, something happens, and if you go home and it's so subtle, the ones that are out there and they call you names or they talk demeaning, you know that's not appropriate. So just say, sorry, I cannot be talked to like that, right? But the ones that I fear are the ones that are so subtle, right? You don't even know they're chipping away at your confidence, your self-esteem, your honor. But you go back to work and you're going, I don't feel, and you feel like you're in a toxic environment suddenly. That's inappropriate behavior. When you go home and your mind is holding you hostage and thinking about something that happened, that's inappropriate behavior. So notice those subtle things as well.
Listen to your gut. I
Yeah.
think it's a really good way to put this, in that if you do go home, or even if you walk out of the room and say, wow, that did not feel right, there was something wrong there, that's when you need to really check in and see what happened. And back to Michelle's point about being very clear on the roles and what is transpiring. I'm going to move into how do we identify and report harassment and or sexual harassment. Uma, you want to start?
Yeah, so this is going to be very different for different companies, the level of company, the countries that these companies are incorporated in, who you're working for. Personally, oh man, I've had so many sexual harassment and just harassment issues on both sides, right? Where I was the reporter or I had to support someone else to get through it as a leader as well. And it's all over the place, I would say. So your first rule of thumb is when you enter into a company, when you're going through the interviews, when you start working for them, find out what the handbook says, what the HR policies are, what the procedures are. Now, a private company that's owned by a family, there's not going to be a lot of details around that. So you need to make sure that you are prepared to have your own rules and policies and strategies aligned to that, right? So develop your own if they don't have it and know who you can trust. One of the biggest thing that I have realized in some of the sexual harassments that has happened to me, and I can talk about it later a bit more, is that the people around me were vouching for me against the person. So I didn't have to worry about saying, oh, this guy harassed me. Everybody else came in and went to the HR and said, this is unacceptable. Uma is a great worker. How can she be treated like that? So have your supporters, have your champions, have your mentors in the company. That's everybody should have that. And till today, I believe in my mentors and champions.
It's interesting you mentioned that at the very start about the different policies that different organizations and companies have, because they do and they will continue. I know I've worked for a few that have an actual code of conduct, and it's lovely to have that out in the open at the very, very start. And some don't at all. And
Yeah.
so that's a reference point. It's back to that data, knowing ahead of time what you can rely on or what to expect is extremely important. And some people won't have, or some companies and organizations won't have that at all. And then you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants, hoping that you have a wonderful, usually female mentor, maybe the male advisor, like Frida had said, and that those are the people that you can contact, come to, ask questions of, say, hey, you know, this happened. Is this a normal action that happens in the company? Or, you know, is what's with this? What's wrong here or what's right here? Michelle.
You know what? I think I want to defer to Ashley because Ashley is an HR professional.
Yes.
And so I want to hear her answer first.
Yeah, I mean, harassment can be, I also like to note, it can show up in different ways, right? Verbal, physical, comments on inappropriately of how you're dressed that day, that's a form of harassment. It doesn't have to be someone breathing down your neck saying the most awful things that we automatically, come to mind. There's so many ways that, again, if you feel uncomfortable, it's probably not okay. So I think ways to address that, if you are confident enough in that situation, stating that this is not okay. I'm not comfortable with this. In meeting with male colleagues, I always have a door open if I'm in the same room. If it's not a clear glass, wall, there's certain things that, unfortunately, in my opinion, that we have to be aware of to make sure that they know that it's not okay. And if situations do happen, like Amanda, I think, pointed out in the chat, have your tribe, either if it's colleagues, if it's your head of HR, your boss, and if there's a situation that happens at work that you're not comfortable with anybody, maybe you just started a role and you don't know who to tell, or you're scared to tell your best friend. Tell someone, a mentor. I think having people around you that will support you in those situations will give you that confidence to put an end to it. But I think, generally you have to say something, because if you don't, it could happen to someone else. and that it will continue to happen until they understand that that is not okay.
This is a perfect segue, Ashley, into one of the next questions from one of the scholars, which is, how should we deal with the aftermath or maybe the trauma of sexual harassment?
Yeah, again, I keep going back to never stay silent. I've been in the situation, I gave an example where I was silent, and in that situation, I think I was so caught off guard that I was like, did that just happen? It wasn't blatant, but it was uncomfortable. Like Uma said, I went home and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I did speak up. I feel like too late in that situation because I did not speak directly to the person who harassed me, but I spoke to my HR person. I felt like I could confide in her. And I think it's important to, again, not stay silent in that situation, and make sure that you can talk to someone, whether a friend outside of work or a mental health advisor, a therapist, or mentor, even in this network. People here are here to support you in any and every which way. And if they don't know how to support, I feel like they'll most likely, direct you in a direction where you can get help. Hopefully
Yes. Michelle, Uma, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I think Ashley is exactly right. You've got to say something. And I think it comes down to documenting as well, documenting the incidents, documenting the exact behavior that, that you're witnessing or that you're being subjected to. This person said this, and then this happened, and really being, again, the clarity of what's transpiring. But as Uma was saying, sometimes it's so subtle. And it can be really easy for somebody to go, oh, you're just being too sensitive. You're just, that was just a joke. That was just a. So I think it comes back to saying something. If you let someone know, whether in the moment or after it's happened, because, let's just be real. Sometimes in the moment, you're so stunned or you're so uncomfortable, or you go into that freeze where you're just like, I don't even know what to do. Sometimes it's probably best that you come back later and address it. But if you let that person know, when you did that to me, that was uncomfortable, and I want that, I don't want that to ever happen again, or I want you to stop doing this behavior, then you've put them on notice. And so I think that that's a big part of it as well, and then in addition to letting other people know, it's about documenting the behavior so that you've got something to point back to.
There's a really interesting, not easy, all of this is difficult, but it's a much more transparent way to say something along the lines of, when you stand too close to me, as an example, I feel, it's an I statement, I feel very uncomfortable, please don't do that anymore. And it can be stated in such a way that it's very direct and simple and non-confrontational, yet you're letting the person know what the observable behavior is that you do not like and is not appropriate. Uma.
Yeah, the thing that I'll add about the aftermath, the trauma, this is no joke, right? It can linger on, it can break you if you do not handle it. If you're feeling personally attacked and it's causing you a lot of mental stress, seek help. Professional help, if you have access to it, call your coaches, mentors, you need to talk to someone, because it's not easy to get over. It can come back if you suppress it, it can come back in the future when something else happens that might trigger it. So you have to address those feelings. You have to sit with the ugliness. If it happened to be really bad sexual harassment and this trauma, you have to address it immediately, but with some really good help that's going to support you on the way.
Yes, all very good information.
Because it is about power. Those kinds of situations are about somebody trying to take away your power and trying to impose their power onto you. And so that is, I think, what can be so damaging is, as Uma said before, it's they're chipping away at your self-esteem, at your sense of safety, at your sense of security. They're making you doubt yourself. And so all of that stuff is what has to get worked through, because it can be so damaging to you if you hold it all in.
Mm-hmm. This is a difficult topic for everyone, and not just the people on our call, but anybody in a company or an organization. Everyone does seem to want to put up a wall around it and say, oh, we don't talk about it, or let's not talk about it. And you want to find the people that are open to listening or saying, yes, you will be signed a mentor moving forward in your career, so that that person is the guidepost to help you as you navigate all these different situations. And so, thank you, Barb and the SheCan people, for us to actually have this wonderful conversation about it, because it is a very difficult topic. I'd like to move on into the navigating relationships with our male colleagues, and how do we establish healthy boundaries with all of the male colleagues that we will be working with throughout our careers. Ashley?
Sure. So this is a hard one, right? I have the personality that I'm very friendly and bubbly, and I like to, evoke that in my relationships with my colleagues. However, I found that in reflecting back on how I show up in meetings with male colleagues, I have a different demeanor when I show up. I show up with an agenda. I am here about business. And it's interesting how I've reflected back on, I'm definitely more friendly and casual with female colleagues, but I feel like you, especially as you're meeting new people, and I'm newer in my current role and I'm still meeting male colleagues, I want to evoke that I own my own presence, right? So body language, holding space in meetings and conversations, showing up, with your shoulders back. Those are little things that maybe can help evoke that you're here for business. I'm not going to be casual with you and, flirtatious with you. Maybe that may be their, how they react to female colleagues. So, there's a couple different things you can do with body language, preparation for meetings, and just knowing that you are in control of the situation, and making sure that they understand that you're not, I'm trying to think of the word, but you own your presence, right? So I think that's some tips that I can give.
Yes, and I know that we were talking also, or it was in the descriptor, about finding your voice. And Frida had also mentioned something about observing and being very quiet in the moment. And sometimes the stillness, the symmetry that you present, the space that you take up, and the softness, the slowness in which you speak is a powerful move as well, in that finding your voice and owning your own presence in a situation, and making sure that you do end up going back to our very first question of owning your personal power. How does that sit with you? How does it feel? Do you feel like you're representing yourself in a really good way in this particular situation? But there are all sorts of nonverbal things that females can do to possess and really own and feel good about their own power without even opening your mouth. There's a lot of other things to think about in that way.
Absolutely. I find myself in conversations with male colleagues and female. I'll often take a pause after making a statement or after they say something, because that pause gives you so much power. They're like, oh, she's thinking, right? So just taking that moment gives you that elevation of who you are in that room.
Yes. Michelle and Uma?
So this has happened recently to me. I have a business associate who's, we chat about business, our companies and stuff like that. It's been like that for a year. He's really nice business contact to have, because there's a lot of opportunities between the consulting line. And like Ashley, I'm a nice person. I'm very cordial. I speak the truth. And it's always been business related. I always bring it back to business talk. I do chit chat, how's the weather? bring it back to business talk. Now, recently, funny enough, he is going through his second divorce and feeling emancipated, not my word, he used that word, emancipated by his ex-wife. So he sent me that text, and that kept wanting to talk to me about his personal relationship problems. And he started sending me late night WhatsApp messages saying something like, "Where would I find a twin sister of yours to date?" Holy Christ. And I'm going, not again. So then I'm going, I didn't reply. I ignored it, thinking, well, he's a good business connection to have. You know, it's new prospects, his network is good. So I didn't cut him off like I would any other person, acquaintance. I'd roll them up and throw them out of my life. I didn't do that. So the next time we talked, it was work. It was very professional on the phone. And we would chat, and that night he'd send me some dodgy message again. So I responded, I would really appreciate it to keep this channel of communication between us, business and professional topics only. I am not interested in getting involved in any manner with your personal life. I hope you will respect my wishes. I will send you the contact of a male coach for your personal problems if you wish to pursue that route, seeing how you need some personal therapy, full stop. Since then, the communication with him has been very, very professional. He respected what I said, and he said, "Thank you, Uma, I do need personal therapy." So sometimes it's not all bad. It's just how you respond with grace and honor and integrity. He's a good person. I knew that for a long time. He's just going through some personal problems. I'm not the person.
It's incredible how clear you were.
10 years ago, I wouldn't have done this. I would have been like, oh, he's a good network, you know, how do I struggle? When I was 16, I would have been like, oh, sure, talk to me about your personal problem, because, you know, he could have been a good mentor. He could have found me opportunities. So that's the personal power. That's your personal strength. As you grow, you're able to articulate yourself in saying no.
Like anything that we become really good at, it takes practice.
Yeah.
And it's a daily practice, and it's a daily awareness. And it's also every time, back to that scaffolding, you're just building, you're building to just become that much more strong. Michelle, did you have anything to add on the building of healthy relationships with me?
No, this is all really good. I mean, it comes back to boundaries and clarity. And, you know, also, you know, being clear about how do I behave in a platonic relationship? And how do I behave in a romantic relationship? Or how do I behave when I am interested in somebody? Because look, I've been young and loose with my boundaries. I've been young and flirted, you know, with somebody on the job. I knew that was what I was doing. And so I think it also takes self-awareness and being honest with yourself about what's happening in the situation. I'm not victim blaming at all. I'm just saying the more clear you can be about how you are conducting yourself and what your intentions are, and how you want to project yourself in the situation in terms of this is a platonic business only relationship like Uma was talking about versus, oh, he's cute. It comes through in your presence.
Absolutely.
And so just being very clear about that, being very clear about your own personal boundaries.
You know, this is another add-on question to the one we just answered, which is how can we show up as determined, confident, and knowledgeable without being labeled the B word? I think this is happening all over. We want to show up as our best selves, being extremely knowledgeable. We want our voices heard in the room. And then all of a sudden you'll hear somebody say, wow, is she a, you know, and they'll label you some way. Do you have any recommendations how you can still own all that personal power, be able to step into a meeting, a very high stakes communication situation, and be present and fully participatory, yet not be labeled that?
Yeah, I think it comes, there are so many, I mean, this is a huge topic. The one thing that comes to mind for me right now is learning how to balance warmth and strength in your presence, in the way that you carry yourself, in the way that you deal with people. And that means having those boundaries, showing up ready to work, ready to play, ready to contribute, saying yes to opportunities, not being afraid to share your voice and your opinions, but also having a smile on your face and also being approachable and relatable and being friendly, bringing your whole self to the situation and not feeling like I've got to be professional, so I've got to be this, hard ass, excuse my French, because I've seen a lot of women do that. They sacrifice all of their warmth because they feel like they've got to show up and play the game in a masculine way in order to be accepted, and it ends up backfiring. And so show up in all of your grace, come in with all of your qualities and your characteristics, and try to balance that approachability and likability with the strength of the personal power as well.
Uma and Ashley?
Exactly what Michelle said. I think everything she stated, the tone and how you show up, but still have that awareness and how you need to show up, because you can still be friendly and bubbly. Like I like to say that my personality is, but you have to learn when to maybe turn that down or turn it up in situations, because you need to lead with empathy and support and warmth and friendliness for your colleagues. But sometimes it's not that situation. You've got to turn that down. So awareness and still coming in with that warmth as well.
And Uma, any last words to add on there?
Yeah, I've lost my head. I've lost my cool in all sorts of meetings. Don't beat yourself up for it, right? It's everything is a learning moment. It's a treasure. I've tried many different versions of losing my head in calm manner and not calm manner. I've been called aggressive in meetings, even though my words were like, hi, that's a great plan. Can I understand the risks behind that? Oh, you're coming off aggressive. You're not a team player. I asked you. So now what I've learned in my life is not to engage in those words. When they call you aggressive, you're a bitch, don't engage it, right? What I do is bring it back to the action at hand. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I really need to know, based on more data, that this is, I think it's a good plan, but I need to know more data to put my stamp on it. So I bring it back to the action at hand. I don't care what you call me. I know who I am. So that's how I've been dealing with it now.
I'd love to reiterate something that Frida said earlier on, because I did take notes. And she went back to what was respected by men. And I think this is good for us all to hear again, which were the results, the hard work, keeping your virtues, persistence, courage, and knowing your stuff. And maybe that's a nice combination of landing not only in your personal power, but also reverting back if you're feeling like that word or words are being labeled, put on a label to you. It's like, no, I'm results oriented, I'm action oriented. I need to ask questions for clarification. It's back into what makes it easier for you to make these decisions, or what makes it easier for you to show up as your whole present self. We have so many more questions, so I'm going to keep moving. But one that was interesting, and we all commented on this, was the question of this: is there a zero harassment, zero discrimination workplace? And if so, what does it look like? And if not, how can we create one?
I would love Uma to start with this one.
Exactly.
This was her question.
There is a zero harassment company. That's mine, and I operate alone. I try not to harass myself. Actually, no, I do harass myself. No, ladies, if you want to look at it, we have to create it. And that's why I put that question out to the ladies is, I want to create companies that are operating, big companies, public companies, private companies, that it's not only about having policies about diversity and inclusion, having trainings about harassment. It's more than that. It's actually adopting a zero tolerance to harassment, sexual harassment, inequality, and all of that stuff. And that's not there yet. And so that was the question I posed, is how do we get there? How do we, as you guys, as younger generation, we're going to pass on the baton to you guys. So I want you guys to think about that, is how do you step into that place where you can create that environment. Because it's there in your call it racism. Everything is there all over the world. It's not gonna go away that easily because it is subtle. Sometimes it's so subtle you don't even know you're doing it yourself, right? So I would like to hear my esteemed colleagues because I know they know more than me.
Well, and I'd love to add on to that. I think it comes down to the people. I'm in talent and recruiting. It comes down to the people who are part of your organization. Who are you bringing in? What's the culture that you're building? You can have trainings for days and days, and we watch it because we have to. But if you're bringing people in that are not buying into that and embodying that culture of zero harassment, you're just not going to get there until you remove those people from the organization. So it starts from the beginning, I think, of making sure you're bringing in good people into the company, continuing to foster conversations of what is and isn't okay. It could be at grabbing a coffee with someone. And if you see a situation happening, stopping it right there, even if it doesn't involve you, that is another way of owning your power, but that's building that culture that we don't tolerate it. So little acts like that in thinking that way as an individual and as, you know, in me and how I'm helping to build my organization is a way that I hope to, you know, increase to get to that zero harassment place, because it's always a work in progress. No one's perfect. I'm not perfect. We all do things and we're like, oh, I should not have said that, you know, and I will stop myself in a situation and apologize because it's not okay. So I think it's just being, again, aware of yourself and the people that around you, people that are coming into the organization. If you're involved in helping bringing people on, those are ways that we can get to that place of zero tolerance.
Mm-hmm. Michelle?
Yeah, all of the above. I think absolutely it starts with bringing in the right people who match the values and the intention of having a zero harassment workplace. It's top down. It's always about leadership. Leadership has to model what the culture that they want to have in their organization. If they're sending a mixed message and saying, oh yeah, we want zero harassment, but their actions are not showing that, or they're allowing certain behavior to happen, it's going to trickle down through the organization. So it has to start with the top. And then also it's about accountability and making sure that when you do have a breach, that there is some kind of a system set in place. And everybody knows what that is going to be, and it's being doled out in an equitable way. And you know, you're not having double standards, and some people are being treated this way and some people are going to be treated this way. All of those things have to happen, and that's hard work. It takes people who are really dedicated to creating that kind of environment for their people.
Yes, all of this is hard work, and they're hard conversations to have, as we find even just having them right here. But it's actually the best ever to talk about them. And as we had mentioned with Frida, I wish I had had a lot of this conversation happening around me when I was in college as well. So I believe we're at about 11:32, and Amanda, Barb, would you like to go into questions now?
Yeah, that would be great. We have a few in the chat that I can kick us off with. So Stray Tom is interested in how you establish boundaries with people who don't value boundaries. How do you start in the first place, especially in a culture where maybe boundaries don't even exist?
I think I think it comes down to articulating what your boundaries are. There are always going to be people who have loose boundaries, but as long as you are establishing your boundaries about what you will and won't tolerate, or what is inappropriate or appropriate for you, that is the starting place. So I'll just say that and hand it over to Uma and Ashley.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was going to say establishing and then making those boundaries known, right? So in situations, I keep coming back to it but not staying silent, making sure that it is clear, that communication is clear, that this will not be tolerated. is key, because we don't know, we can't read each other's minds. And if I'm someone who just does whatever I want, I'm not going to know until you state that that's not okay. So it's understanding what is okay for you, and then making it known that what your boundaries, what lines not to cross.
And I agree with both the ladies. When you have an environment that is toxic, kind of situation where nobody seems to respect boundaries, how I've approached it in my life is making people know this is my boundaries, and having that support network that believes in the same level of boundaries and same values and same level of moral values and honor and integrity. So having that support group within the company really helped. There are many situations where I was unable to leave the company because I had a visa or something dependent on it. So, you're trapped, and the feeling of trapped is awful. You burn out. So I'm not going to sugarcoat this, but if you have the strength of character, that's why I'm saying build it up, and always say no to something that, even if they don't have the boundary, if the company doesn't respect that or doesn't have the culture that allows them to respect that, you have to say individually with your support group, network group, that that's not appropriate, and full stop, no. Sufficiently to say, I've never been thrown out of a company for saying no, never. So be brave when you want to say no.
I'm hearing all of you really say that it doesn't matter if other people don't have boundaries. If you know your boundaries, you can hold firm to those and continue to say no and continue to speak up when something's not right. Similarly, so Peck is curious about not just boundaries, but what kind of relationship should be established when our scholars are interacting with their college network, specifically male professors. How do you establish those relationships appropriately?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to, again, the clarity in what your intention is. What do you want this relationship to look like? And being really clear about that in terms of your presence, in terms of the communication that you have with that person, and clarity, boundaries. It kind of, this this seems to be the overarching theme of our conversation today. I don't think that a situation doesn't come to mind where establishing a boundary with a college professor is any different than establishing a boundary with a colleague or establishing a boundary with a boss. You're defining for yourself what that relationship is going to look like, and articulating that and reinforcing that in your presence, in the way that you communicate and in your behavior.
Even now, when I consult with academics that are male, I leave the door open, and female too, but it's an open door policy. Yet at the same time, if I walk into an office, even now, and the male professor shuts the door, I say, oh, I'd feel really good if we just left this open. It's establishing the boundaries that are comfortable for you. I know that if that door is shut, when I was in the meeting, I would not feel comfortable for the whole meeting. I just wouldn't. So it's, again, knowing what works for you and may not work for someone else, but back to what Michelle said, being super clear on how you want to establish that relationship, so that our relationship is very open. If somebody else wanted to join in, they could. Yet at the same time, I'm developing a personal relationship with the person I'm speaking to, and it's still very deliberate that I'm setting boundaries.
So we have time for, I think, 2 more questions, and I think these two work really well together. I can only speak to my experience in America, but the onus of responsibility for standing up, it tends to be on the marginalized community experiencing the aggrieved behavior, right? So it's the woman who has to stand up and say no. So the 2 questions that we have, Michelle is curious about how we can teach younger generations, especially boys, to stop harassment and to protect girls. So kind of starting young, instead of having the girls be the ones to have to say no. How do we teach our boys differently? And then similarly, from a community perspective, how can we as women healthfully and effectively support our colleagues who are being harassed? How can we show up for others who are experiencing it?
Uma, Ashley?
The first question about in your own society, I come from Asia, and I grew up with, I came from a very poor background. I mean, we didn't have milk back in the days and stuff like that. So you'd be pretty amazed how all of us are today. No one would know that we came from a very poor background. Having said that, I grew up with two big brothers, and my parents never, ever brought me up to think that I couldn't do what they could do. There was no difference between my two big brothers, who were about 4 years and 2 years older than me, and me. They treated me differently, obviously, because I was their darling baby girl and stuff like that, very protective. And my brothers would take me everywhere and do all sorts of stunts. They dropped me a lot on my head. So I grew up thinking that there's nothing I could do. And so what I learned from that was my parents actually set the tone for me that, you know, we are really strong women as girls, and we're actually very adventurous. There's no limitations to physicalities. My brothers today all run businesses, and they've always told me, Uma, leave your job. You are a natural leader. So who am I to look at myself and say, oh, I'm not qualified to set up a company because some other guy in the corporate headquarters said I'm not good enough, right? So I wish all parents would raise their kids in a way that is equal and equal opportunity based. And then for the second part, how do you support someone else who's being harassed? Step up, say no for them, and give them the tools, give them the strategy, help them out. I've had stepped in many times for the ladies who worked in my company who were not in a high ranking position and they were being harassed by top executives. I stepped in and I went directly to the executive and say, you will knock this out or I am calling lawyers. And I will sue everybody in this company and I have evidence. And that's how but I could do that because I was in a higher position. So if you see someone suffering, help them. That's the basic thing you can do.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think in ways that you might be able to show up, just be able to listen to them, depending on the situation that they've just been through. Maybe they're not ready to talk, but letting them know that you're there for them, to listen without judgment. Maybe I know in my own life, sometimes I just want to talk at someone. I don't want their feedback, you know? So giving them that space to make the decision on how you can help them, I think is also really important, because everyone is different and you may just want to like scream at someone or hit something or just talk, or you actually want advice, and who can I go and talk to? So showing up for colleagues and friends and that you've known have gone through situations like that, and just being there, I think is really important.
Yeah, I wouldn't add anything to that. I think that they covered it. Being there, you know, just validating their experience, because so often when you are being harassed, sometimes you can feel like you're going crazy or you're being too, because a part of the strategy of harassment is to tell the victim that they're crazy or they're too sensitive, or the gaslighting that can occur in harassment situations. And so sometimes just validating that person's experience and going, no, you're not crazy. No, that was inappropriate. Sometimes that can be so incredibly valuable to somebody who might feel like they're overreacting, which is the worst thing to feel in a situation like that.
Thank you. Barb, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point.
Okay, Janet, do you want to wrap it up with a last question, or are we kind of? Oh wait, I
You're
think
muted.
you're
There we
muted.
go. There we go. I love to talk to silence, complete silence, so I keep myself mute. I'd love to, as we move through this day and have, you know, a collective sigh over what is transpiring currently in our universe, I think it's a good time for self-care, and give yourself that moment to be kind to yourself and to others as we move through our day and weeks ahead. And then also, one of the quotes when things get really bad for me and I have a bad day and I'm thinking things aren't quite right or feeling less than, I've reflected on this quote so much and I love it. And it's from Eleanor Roosevelt. Probably quite a few of you have heard it, which is, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And it gives me some pause to think about that, going, wow, I feel pretty good about myself. So why am I letting someone else take away that personal power? And I'd love to just really quickly ask the panelists if they had one piece of advice to send off to our scholars, what would it be?
I would start with authenticity. Know who you are, know your value. That's really the foundation for everything, and foundation for resilience is knowing who you are.
I would add that you are worthy and you have power no matter where you are in your education, in your career. Know that you own your own power. Continue to ask questions, be curious, never stop, never give up on yourself. And most importantly, as I've stated throughout this, never stay silent. It's really important.
And I would add that know the difference between protecting yourself with boundaries versus walls. Don't build the walls up because you're going to lose your opportunity when it comes knocking. So you're going to say no to everybody. Bring down the walls, have healthy boundaries. And the way you can do that is build your inner self. Be very in tune with your gut instincts, your intuition. It's going to take you all the way to success. So you're not afraid, you're not building walls and protecting yourself. Build healthy boundaries.